Folks, welcome. Today's topic of our webinar is what does good mobile application security visibility look like, right? And the reason we're doing this topic is the mobile application market is quite fragmented, and we see a lot of tools and solutions in this space, but that doesn't necessarily mean enterprises using these tools have good security visibility. And we wanted to touch on a few areas where visibility is most important. And also, what does good look like, right? Again, joining me today is Grant Goods. He is our innovation architect at Zimperium. Grant, welcome. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Krishna. It's great to be here. Look forward to discussing this with our participants.
Let's dive right in, Grant. So folks, the agenda, real quick. One, we'll start off with what does an enterprise mobile app footprint look like today, right? We have over 2,000 customers today, and all of them use mobile apps slightly differently. They have a lot of things in common, but there are also some differences. And the way they use mobile apps determines what security, protections, and visibility they need. Thank you, Siri. Where do you really need visibility? I think that's the big question we'll attempt to provide some clarity on. What are the characteristics of good visibility? When you go into the market looking for security products, you have a lot of vendors offering a lot of features. But when it comes to visibility and threat telemetry and forensics, there's some key things you can look for that will really help you get actionable information, right? We'll talk about those things, some key takeaways at the end of it, and we'll take any questions at the end. Okay, just some housekeeping things before I move ahead. During the presentation, if you have any questions, use the Q&A function of this platform, submit your questions. When we get to the end, we will go through all the questions and try to answer as many live as possible. If there's a question that we might need to get back to you, we will reach out after the webinar and set up some time to have a one-on-one conversation. So again, feel free to ask questions. We're happy to take the time. With that being said, let's dive right in. So the enterprise mobile footprint, like I mentioned before, when we look at about 300 or 400 of our tier one customers, all of them are heavily invested in mobile as a platform, right? Whether it's for productivity, business growth, or on the public sector side, there's a lot of empowerment-based initiatives, right? They want to help their citizens access government services easier, pay utilities easier, reach out to law enforcement easier, right? So there's a lot of empowerment initiatives on public sector. Now, all these initiatives, when it comes to mobile apps, enterprises have embraced one of these four different types of applications, right? If you look at the two in orange, I have in-house developed apps, something we're all very familiar with. These are apps where the enterprises are building apps internally, right? They have development teams, Android, iOS, teams dedicated to building these apps. Outsourced apps, there are some sectors where the enterprise has outsourced app development to a third party, but they are entitled to the code of the app, right? So when they publish the app to the store, it still has their name and brand in it, right? It's typical outsourcing. The other two commercial apps are really, if you look at enterprises and productivity, they're also buying apps off the shelf, right? If you think of Jira, Salesforce, Expensify, Concur, these are all third-party business apps that enterprises are buying and pushing to their employees for productivity typically, right? They're not your apps, but you are, as part of the contract you sign with the vendor, you do get a mobile app and a web app, right? So they're companion apps. And the last but not least are public apps, which are if your employees are accessing your enterprise systems on their own mobile device or a mobile device you've given them, any personal apps they download on that device, right, also exposes the enterprise to risk, right? So when you step back and ask an enterprise, how invested are you in mobile apps? We typically see they're invested in all of these categories, right? Now, obviously you have the apps. The apps themselves run on different types of devices, right? One, if it's employee devices, it could be corporate owned BYOD. These are typical devices that all of us own. There might be some specialized devices in factory, in a retail setting. And then you have apps, if you're building apps for your customers, if you're a bank, your banking apps, your payment apps, right? These are running on your customer devices, right? You absolutely have no control on customer devices. So we look at this we highlight this fact because you not only have different types of apps you're invested in, but they're also running on different types of devices that expose them to certain risks. And the apps themselves today, right, do a lot, right? Grant, I know this is something you and I talk about all the time. First, when apps came, they used to do one thing and one thing well. But it seems like we've gone from that to a
Yeah.
completely multifunctional apps now.
I mean, obviously, mobile devices began as primarily a communication device, a phone, and then we added communication via email, uh, various types of chats, and then, of course, people use them for other purposes such as games, but none of these things would have been considered particularly high security or sensitive. Uh, they would be basically facilitating what you used to do with your telephone. Everything else was still occurring on enterprise desktops. People would do their banking, any enterprise level serious communication, creation and sharing of documents would also occur on desktops. But now what we're seeing, certainly in the last decade, is that people expect to do all those originally desktop type activities, such as banking, even purchasing plane tickets, checking in. Lots of activities that would have been on the desktop are now occurring primarily on mobile. And these customers or these users of mobile devices are perhaps not aware of that, of how radical a change that is, and how
Yeah.
the device was not built for such a thing originally. I call a cell phone a hostile target because effectively it's easily attacked. It's in your pocket. Someone can pick it up from your table at a restaurant when you go to the washroom and potentially access your information. So despite the fact that there are security features built into the operating system, the apps are now doing much more sensitive things, processing financial transactions, accessing personally sensitive information such as your credit card details, your name and address. So yeah, it's a radically different world. And I think in particular, the last 10 years and post-COVID or during COVID and into that post-COVID period, I think an entire new generation of people have moved entirely onto the mobile, and
Yeah.
not just end users, also companies, enterprises. They've just said, okay, it used to just be the CEO who might be using his mobile device, or their mobile device, but now we're getting everybody in the enterprise using mobile devices.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. You made me think of something, right, Grant? It's one, the reality is a lot of these apps run on devices that the enterprise doesn't control, like you said. And two, they're always on us. It's a great way for someone to target you because they all know you have your phone on you. You probably have a social handle, something that identifies you uniquely. So targeting becomes so easy on these devices as well. So it is, as much as we love our phones, I think it's definitely something enterprises are realizing that there is tremendous attack surface there with the device and the app. Now, for us to understand, if you understand this, right, you kind of understand that when you think of what visibility do you want, right, there are several elements to it, right? There are different types of apps running on different types of devices, and these apps are all doing different things. So when you think about security visibility, you want to know what is happening across the apps on different devices for certain areas as well, right? But to do that, you have to first understand where are the big buckets of risk when you talk about mobile apps, right? Because There's a lot going on with apps, but the best way to simplify visibility is I put 3 buckets in which risks emerge. And we believe this is a good way for you to start understanding what the risks are. And then that will help you identify the right type of visibility you need. And the 3 buckets here really that the way we look at it is there's during development. This is when the app has not left your building, right? Your development teams, testing teams are looking at it. 2, if you're publishing this app in any kind of store, right? Especially the public store. And we have a lot of enterprises that build customer-facing apps. And then obviously when that app gets downloaded and installed, whether from a private store or a public store, on an employee's device, right? These are 3 unique situations where the risks are different and the risk actors are different, right? Grant, your take on just this
Yeah,
lens that we put on the world.
and I think one of the things that the bullet under during development mentions is the sensitivity of reducing costs and getting time to market. The mobile app development world is a very much more fast-paced and low cost. The expectation is that it's a lower cost solution than traditional enterprise level apps, which would have potentially been multi-year projects. We expect in the mobile world to publish an app maybe quarterly, maybe monthly, new updates, bug fixes, UI changes, and the team is also cheaper and smaller than they would have been in enterprise land. So security is to some degree an afterthought. It costs. It would have a cost to include security, and most mobile app shops are so focused on that fast pace, that time to market, and the user experience that security ends up being an afterthought. So that's one of the reasons why risks in development really emerge. And I know that I also see you have once published. Most people assume that, hey, I know my app has been published to the store, but it's been encrypted. You can't directly download it. All you can do is take it down to your device and install it. And the operating systems, the major ones, iOS and Android, provide encryption of those apps, and all you can do is run it on the device where there's supposed to be a sandbox that prevents you from analyzing. But unfortunately, there's this thing called rooting on Android and jailbreaking on iOS, which permits the attacker to break the sandbox and access the original raw app. So you can't just assume the store is secure. And finally, on the device itself, as I mentioned, I call it the hostile target. That device is exposed directly to the malicious will of attackers if they wish. They can connect to it by Wi-Fi, they can connect to it by the USB port. They can just experiment on their own copy of the device and have full access. So effectively, it's a different world than you would have had in enterprise where you had a firewalled set of machines in a machine room. It's a different world, and there's a lot more risk.
And on the end user devices, I think sometimes what gets underestimated is the end user controls the phone, right? Like the way I use my phone is very different from how you will use your phone, right? We connect to Wi-Fi as we travel. I'm downloading apps, games from third-party stores because they're cheaper, whatever it might be. The usage pattern of the end user on that phone is a huge risk factor, right? It sometimes is lost when we talk to enterprise security people because they think about, I think it's easier to comprehend app security during development because it's very close to web and they understand the fact that apps can be downloaded. But what we see a lot of times when we talk to enterprises, they forget that the end user, the way he uses his mobile phone, right? His cyber hygiene, as we refer to it, can really impact how safe your app is on that device. And that's why when we think of visibility, we put it in these 3 buckets because developers are introducing risks. There's a threat actor, reverse engineer who's looking to reverse the app and learn something. And then you have the end user who's inadvertently exposing your app to the elements, right? Or a lot of times they don't understand the implications of some of the things they do on their phone. So you have very different types of risks, which means you need visibility across these 3 buckets, right? But one of the things we see is even in each of these categories, for you to understand what good visibility looks like, you need to ask some key questions, right? Otherwise, you end up with traditional security measures which don't match the sophistication of today's attacks, right? And that's really what we'll get into next is we'll talk about each of these buckets and we'll say, what are some questions that can help you really ensure whatever solution you choose, you're getting the right visibility to take action. Let's start with the one you talked about, right? Grant development. Now, most people understand that all the major apps, like look at the major apps on our phone. These are apps that were built hundreds, if not by thousands of developers contributing code, right? That's just the way the world works today. And during development, when we talk to enterprises, a lot of them tell us we have source code scanners, right? We've always had them, right? Even from the web app world, we've had source code scanners. We've had multiple source code scanners. But what we fail to see in a lot of enterprises is they don't have a solution that gives them visibility into, was my mobile app sufficiently protected, right? And is there runtime, but do I know what happens to my app once it leaves my building, right? They are looking at, oh, am I using the right, is code quality good? Am I using good SSL libraries maybe, right? You have a lot of SCA tools that say the third-party tools you're using, are the licenses, healthy or not? But they don't have something that looks at the mobile app and gives them visibility into the things we have here. Code protection sufficient, runtime protection. Are you doing something in this app where the data is compromised on the device, right? And we see a lot of this not being in the app, right? And a lot of source code scanners sometimes focus on code quality, but they're not telling you how easy it is to abuse your app once it leaves the building, right? What is your thought on why
Yeah,
we see this quite a bit, Grant? I mean, why is this not so intuitive, I guess?
I think part of the challenge here is that traditional enterprise level security, enterprise apps, it's a relatively mature field and it's well studied, is well understood. And so you might just think all we're doing is writing code with a different language for a different target. It's the same thing. The problem is the mobile target itself has a vastly different attack surface. It's much bigger, and the expertise just isn't there. So what we have noticed in our research is that in general, security professionals, software security is a rare skill set. It's hard to find. It's expensive to hire such people. Most enterprise level institutions have some team that is used to dealing with their mainframes and their desktop applications, but they're not really the mobile field. Security is a new notion. It's very fast paced. The attack tooling is constantly changing. You need people who have experience with that attack tooling. And what we've also seen, in addition to the skill set shortage, is that the attack tools have become nearly free or absolutely free. Open source, you can just download these tools. You don't need to be a sophisticated, many years of experience attacker to apply these tools. So what that produces a huge challenge. The institutions, enterprises that are building mobile apps really struggle. As you pointed out, source code scanners and other traditional approaches only scrape the surface. They only find the classic vulnerabilities, inappropriate use of cryptography, weak keys, exposed personal information. What you need is to have a holistic view during development. You need help. You need to integrate some sort of tooling into your CI/CD pipeline while you're developing, that assures that you have security. And as you pointed out, gives you visibility on the risks that you're incurring by using a mobile platform.
Yeah, and it's the third-party code also always, I think, is something unique to mobile because we know 60 to 70% of code in mobile apps is third party these days, right? You're just borrowing frameworks, whether it be Flutter, Android, iOS, whatever it might be. And there's so much of third-party code, right? And if it's open source, it's fine. There are some tooling out there, but if it's proprietary, you absolutely have no idea what's going on inside, right? So third-party code is also something I think is starting to really become a problem in mobile, especially because we want to go faster. We don't want to create something from scratch. But do you know what's going on, right? What is it? But the WebP vulnerability was an interesting one that came up. Vulnerabilities in widely used frameworks spread like wildfire, right? So you not having the visibility to know that there is a third-party code component that is now vulnerable is going to become a problem. Especially if it's proprietary code, you have an even bigger problem because you don't have access to source code. So think about these things. Protection, does it have the right types of protection for open source and proprietary? Am I able to see what's going on during development? Is the data going to be safe? This is the other big thing with mobile. When mobile apps run on end user devices, your information leaves your building. It leaves your safe zone, right? It leaves all the protections, the perimeter of their enterprise, as they call it, and is operating on a mobile device that doesn't have really any protection on it. So you have to, any tooling that you think of for mobile during development has to give you some insight into these things, but to see whether you've done enough, right? The second area, again, stores and this notion that stores are walled gardens, right? Now, there is, as you know, if you submitted an app into these stores, there's quite a bit of things you have to do to get into the stores, but that doesn't guarantee a lot. The reason why, think about it, if you are a banking app, you don't have to be a customer to download the app on my device, right? If I'm a Bank of America customer, if I want to download the Bank of America app from the store, I don't need to be a Bank of America customer, right? There's nothing in the store that's preventing me from downloading it on my device, which could be jailbroken or rooted, because I have malicious intent on what I want to do with the app. So when we think about stores and what can happen to you in stores and people can download and reverse engineer, I think there are a lot of solutions we hear about, Grant, right? There's code obfuscation's been around for a while. Anti-tampering tools have been around for a while. But the one thing we constantly see when we talk to enterprises about whether it's free tools or relatively inexpensive tooling, none of them tell you if someone's actually trying to tamper or reverse or trying to do something, right? So their strategy is we've applied some protections and we hope no one's trying to do it. Isn't this odd? I mean, I don't understand why this is even acceptable, to be honest.
Well, honestly, I think it's partly because the mobile security story is, as I mentioned, a somewhat immature field, and it probably wasn't realized to the extent that it should have been, that having visibility on what's actually happening to my app once it's left my hands, once it's gone to the store and it's potentially, as you said, downloaded by any non-customer who is potentially malicious, can analyze that app with simple tooling. So simply obfuscating, simply protecting against static reverse engineering isn't sufficient. Most of the attacks that occur, most of the exploits, most of the analysis is actually dynamic, what we call dynamic, meaning you are running the app. You can't just look at the code, because the code, yeah, it's obfuscated. It's a megabytes of code. It's potentially quite painful to analyze. But if you are running the app and you can just say, hey, I just see that it sent out a transaction to the bank. It's encrypted, but I want to go look at what it was just before it was encrypted. If you can run the app dynamically, examine memory with a debugger, attach a debugger via USB and expose that memory, you can pull out the pre-encrypted data, the plain text as we call it. So these sorts of dynamic attacks is a fantastic part of the attack surface, but it's also something where the static approach doesn't really work. You need to actively detect and intercept, and potentially prevent, and additionally give telemetry that this is happening. If you can see, these attacks take time, they're dynamic. They take, in some cases, hours and days. If you had a signal coming up to your server saying, by the way, your app appears to be in a situation where it's on an unsafe platform that's been rooted and there's a debugger attached, and by the way, some memory has been modified, you can tell that there's an exploit in progress. and you can react. You can do something. You could potentially cut that account off and freeze it because it's under, you can enact fraud responses, but you need the telemetry. You need that visibility on what's going on my app in devices out there in the field. Potentially geographically, there may be an attack going only occurring in one particular geography. You need to know that. You need that visibility.
Yeah. And that's why it's always so surprising to us, right? When we talk to enterprises about, do they understand the need for code protection tampering? It's always a yes. But then when we ask them, how do you know if someone's actually trying to do it? Most of the times they don't, right? So they don't even, I think they lose an opportunity to understand, to assess an attack and understand the sophistication, like you say, right? If you don't see it, you don't know how sophisticated these attacks are even, or how someone's trying to bypass your protections. And the last area is, again, I think we've started talking about this. The app is actually installed, let's just assume, on an intended customer or an intended end user's device. Again, the problem starts with the fact that the device, the enterprise does not control the device, right? And most enterprises invested in apps want to be installed on as many devices as possible, right? Because they're trying to gain market share. So they always lean towards allowing you to install it on your device, whether it's jailbroken, rooted, compromised, because they are business leaning. We see this all the time. They're trying to get land on as many devices as possible. So they will ignore a lot of the warnings, right? Even theoretical ones. So here, what good visibility look like is if you're an app and you're running on 10, 20, 30 million, even 100K devices of your customers, let's just say, one, you want to know, is the app running in a trusted environment, right? That's your biggest concern, right? So what does trusted environment mean? Has the device been compromised, right? Has someone jailbroken, rooted, done something else to their device, trying to put a mod on it, whatever it might be? Have they lowered the security threshold of their device to a point where it becomes vulnerable to other people attacking it, right? That's one. The second one is fake devices, right? A lot of apps can't even tell if they're running on a fake device. And we see this used in banking fraud a lot. Because today, if you think of an example like digital account opening, Grant, I remember when we had to go and sign papers to open an account, because that was the most risky transaction for the bank. Fast forward 10 years, 15 seconds, and I can open an account, right? I can open a credit card account, even a new savings or checking account these days, right? So AML, KYC have become an afterthought in that process because they want that new user. And if you can't tell if it's a real device, this happens a lot where a fraudster could just have a fake device or an emulator and just create thousands of accounts, making it look like it's coming from a real device. And you can't do anything about it because if you've given him a line of credit, he could spend it and just walk away, right? So when we say, and that's why I think the most important way of looking at this is that execution environment on this device trusted? Right? Can you trust it? Can you trust the network? Can you trust the device? Can you trust the OS? Does it have malware? But understanding the risk posture of that device gives you tremendous insights into what should you be securing against to begin with, right? I mean, security is not free, Grant. You know that, right? There's a cost, there's a trade-off. I mean, wouldn't that help make good security decisions?
I would say that this is analogous to in the mobile land to the same problems that you have during the development phase, where low cost, time to market, and rapid development is what mobile is all about. It's a fast world. Also, with mobile, you want to get to as many devices as possible. You want to be able to cover the world, all geographies, all models of the device. You're not going to be limiting yourself to only the latest and most expensive Android devices. You want to run on every possible device because you're trying to get that coverage of the globe. So that means it's again like the security trade-off that mobile development tends to involve because of the time to market requirements and et cetera. There's also a security consequence of covering the world. you are going to end up running on compromised devices and you won't know it. So if you don't want to give up covering the world, so how do you solve the problem? What you solve it by having visibility into the safety of the device, of the environment in which your app is running. The app may be very secure. If it's on a compromised or fake device, though, you're in trouble and you need to know that. So you need the visibility, and that's not something that the operating system naturally provides. The platform, iOS and Android, just says, trust us, we're secure, but they aren't. There's rooting and jailbreak exists, and fake devices exist. So what you want are not necessarily just the insight that my actual app is being attacked at this second. You need to know it's on a compromised device. That means there could be a threat chain that's about to occur that's going to result in my app being attacked, my private sensitive data being lifted. But you don't know that yet. What you need is the clue. And I think this is just like if you were going to go to a restaurant in a bad neighborhood, you would like to, or in a neighborhood that you've never been to, you'd like to have the warning signs. Oh, I don't really feel this is sketchy. Maybe I'm going to turn around and go to a different restaurant. So essentially, you'd like to give those insights back to the enterprise, covering the world. There's potentially millions of devices that app might be installed on, but maybe only a few percentage are compromised, and you can do something then. Again, you can enact fraud, anti-fraud. You can downgrade the account's access. You could say, well, this particular account cannot create a new mortgage because it looks like it's running on a device that could be compromised.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy, right? We would never go to a restaurant in a bad environment if we knew, right? And that's a great analogy. Now, if we take these three buckets that we talked about and we overlay a typical life cycle, right? Obviously, there are areas to apply protections, right? But when we overlay the types of visibility we just spoke about, it's evident that you need visibility throughout the life cycle, right? During development, when a build gets created, when your testers are assessing the application before it gets released, or what's called pre-release testing. And even when it leaves the building and it's sitting on your stores and it's sitting on an end user's device, you need to know and be alerted when things are going wrong. So really, when you think of visibility, don't think of it in terms of tooling. Think about it is in all these different stages that my app goes through. Am I able to get security visibility to know if, one, am I introducing vulnerabilities? Two, is someone actually tampering with my app? Three, is data leaking, right? Is something going wrong once the app ended up on a device? So a holistic view on security visibility is something that has really helped even our customers make good informed security decisions and trade-offs. Because like I said, security is not free. You will not be able to protect everything. So this helps you choose your protections in aligned with the threats that your app is seeing, which is really important. Takeaways. Like I said, when you do visibility, when you're thinking visibility, I want you all to kind of think about it, go back and say, do you today have visibility in these three buckets? Development, most of you have source code scanners, but do you know how well the app is protected? Is it protected enough? Am I catching the most important vulnerabilities ahead of time for mobile, right? Or are you running generic code quality type of tests in stores? Ask your mobility team if they're the ones looking at it, or your SOC team. What happens if something goes wrong on the store? What happens if someone tries to reverse the app, tamper the app, repackage the app? Do you get alerted? Or what happens? How do you know, right? Third one, like I said, across your mobile app footprint, whether the app's running on your employee's device or your customers, is it running in trusted environments? Is it being abused by malware? Do you know? Like, how do you know today if something goes wrong with your app on an end user's device? What kind of visibility do you have? And are you able to action on it? I highly recommend you kind of go back and look at these things. Grant, any final comments from you on just
Yeah. I
what
would say that
information?
this is not just a fire and forgets scenario. You don't just say, I'm going to run a scanner. It says thumbs up, I'm good. I'm going to apply code obfuscation. My app is harder to reverse engineer. I'm good. And I'm relying on the Apple or Google Store to protect my app by encrypting it. That's not good enough anymore, if it ever was. And what you need is additional visibility into these various stages of risk. You need to understand what those risks are and see them as they're happening. And I would say, finally, a biggest problem that a lot of this has is that there's typically these are relatively new technologies, and there tends to be disparate solutions for each stage. That adds a lot of cost to an enterprise because they have to train, they have to purchase separate tooling, they have to train people to use them, configure them, and get the results out, and their results are presented in different forms. What you would really like is a security platform, a mobile security platform that provides all three stages during development in the store, on the device, gives you visibility, and reports the threats in a unified manner that you can digest with a single team as opposed to multiple teams. So I think that's the world we want to get to.
Yeah, and it's a great segue into, and that's really for those of you thinking this is how Imperium helps. We help enterprises, right? Enterprises have these needs. They're looking for unified security tooling. They don't want to go to the market and get 6 different products, try to integrate them somehow and make it all work. They're looking for a security platform that helps them solve multiple security issues across the mobile application lifecycle, not just protection, like Grant said. Also, they want the visibility. And we provide a single platform that protects your apps and also gives you visibility across development and runtime. Now, for those of you who are interested and want to kind of experience what we have to offer, we are offering our mobile application scanner free for 30 days. So you can, if you have a lot of mobile apps that you develop, these are for the ones you develop and you own, we will give you access to our Zscan solution, which is a mobile binary scanner for 30 days. You can assess all your apps and you will start seeing the type of visibility we are talking about, right? Does my app has enough security? Is code protection enough? Do you have runtime protection? Will the app lose data on the device or on a bad network? All you have to do to exercise this offer, go to the Imperium website, click contact us, as I'm showing on the left, fill in your details and say, request 1 month free trial of Zscan, right? Punch it in. Someone from our side will reach out and get you going. I highly recommend you taking this offer to experience the visibility for yourself, right? Before investing in any tooling. Let's see if there are any questions. Let me just go back. Okay. Right, I don't see any questions in the interest of time. Again, Imperium is a mobile security company, so we provide a lot of threat intel to the market to help customers and prospects kind of educate themselves on what the mobile threat landscape looks like. If they're invested in mobile or if they want to be mobile first, what are the risks you need to mitigate so that security becomes a business enabler? So go to our website. There's a ton of information to educate yourself on what threats matter these days, what to think about when you're building mobile apps, and how do you onboard employee devices, onto your network. With that, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the session. Grant, thank you for being part of the panel and giving us some insight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Until the next time.
Thank you, everyone.